Assange just speaking right there. Joining us now is Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's interesting. Donald Trump continues to cast doubt on the intelligence coming from the community here in the United States about Russia and the alleged hacking into the political process last year. And now in these tweets, he seems to be trusting Julian Assange over them. Your reaction?
Well, I don't believe any American should give a whole lot of credibility to what Mr. Assange says. And in Julian Assange's world, we're the bad guys, not the Iranians, not the Russians, not the North Koreans. You got to remember who this guy is. WikiLeaks released classified information back during the Iraq War that our military said put our soldiers at risk. They released combat footage to try to say that our helicopter pilots were war criminals. They released classified information about communications between our government and foreign leaders that embarrass foreign leaders in our government. So Mr. Assange is a fugitive from the law, hiding in an embassy, who has a history of undermining American interest. I hope no American will be duped by him. You shouldn't give him any credibility. Look at his record in terms of how he treats our country, and he seems not to be concerned at all by Russia, Iran, or North Korea. So I hope the president-elect will get his information and trust the American patriots who work in the intelligence community, who swear oath and allegiance to the Constitution, and not some guy hiding from the law who has a record of undercutting and undermining American democracy.
But the fact that, to this point, Senator, that the president-elect is citing Julian Assange as he continues to cast doubt on the intelligence community with regard to the hacks, says what to you?
It's very disturbing, quite frankly. He'll be briefed Friday. I encourage the president to be doubtful and to ask hard questions of the intelligence community. I've been briefed by the FBI. You know, I don't know a lot about hacking, but I know a lot about the Russians. I just got back from the Baltic states, Georgia, and the Ukraine. And when you go there, you understand that Russia is trying to undermine democracies all over the world. That when Estonia removed a statue to Lenin in 2007 and 8, the Russians shut down the power in Estonia. When the Georgian parliament invited Crimean parliament members to come to a regional conference to stand up for the Crimea, the parliament website got hacked by the Russians. There's no doubt in my mind that the Russians hacked into the DNC political organization and John Podesta. It wasn't a 14-year-old kid unless he was working for the KGB. It wasn't a 300-pound guy unless he was a Russian agent. So every American should be worried about this. It's the Democrats today. It could be the Republicans tomorrow. Our parties are the backbone of democracy. None of us should be gleeful when a foreign entity hacks into the political system in America to try to interfere with our elections. And that's what the Russians did. This was done by the Russians, and I hope by Friday President-elect Trump will come to that realization and ignore Mr. Assange. Not only should he ignore Julian Assange, he should condemn him for what he's done to our country, putting our soldiers at risk, putting our foreign policy at risk. Julian Assange is no friend of America, and he's no friend of democracy.
Well, clearly he's not doing that. The president-elect is not doing that.
Right.
He's tweeting him. He's citing him right now
Yeah.
In his statements. You said, I hope no American will be duped by him, Julian Assange. Do you think the president-elect of the United States has been duped?
I don't know. All I can tell you is that I hope he listens to the intelligence briefing. I'm sure he will. All 17 intelligence agencies have come to the same conclusion. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out what the Russians are up to. They're trying to break the backbone of democracies throughout the entire world. Every time somebody does something they don't like in their neighborhood, where you have emerging democracies like the Ukraine and Georgia, they hack them or invade them. So I am fully convinced that the Russians did this. I hope the president will come to that conclusion. And I'm introducing sanctions next week in a bipartisan fashion with Senator McCain and Senator Cardin and others to go after Russia. More sanctions, not less, to deter their behavior, not just against us, but the world at large. And if we don't stand up to the Russians, you're going to get more of this.
But Senator, you're fully convinced. Other Republican senators are fully convinced. What is the chance then that Donald Trump receives this briefing on Friday and he comes out and agrees with your assessment? At this point, do you think he can be convinced?
Yeah, you know, General Mattis mentioned to the president that when it comes to gathering information on the battlefield, give me a couple of pack of cigarettes and a cold beer, that's better than waterboarding, and that impressed the president. I'm going to give the president the benefit of the doubt. Again, I don't mind him challenging intelligence. I don't mind him being doubtful. I do hope he will listen. All I can tell you is that everybody that I know of who's been briefed comes to the conclusion that the Russians did it, and again, they're doing it everywhere, not just in our backyard. And if he goes after China and Iran, they're very capable of hacking into the Republican political establishment. We can't let any foreign entity, Mr. Assange included. I don't believe a word of what Mr. Assange has said. This is the guy who's tried to put Americans at risk by releasing classified information during the Bush years. This is the guy who basically is a fugitive from justice and accused rapist on the run. For heaven's sakes, don't listen to him. Listen to the American intelligence community who are patriots.
Senator, you're going to vote on a number of confirmations, a number of nominations coming up.
Right.
Will your vote be contingent on these nominees declaring that they believe that Russia was behind the hack, something that the president-elect is not willing to do?
I'm looking for people who understand the world as it is, that the Russians have been not only invading their neighbors, but undercutting democracy throughout the entire world. They've kept the butcher of Damascus aside in power. They're a disruptive force. And if a nominee for a critical job doesn't understand what the Russians are up to, I'll have a hard time believing they have the judgment to do their job. It's ultimately up to the president. If after good sound advice he turns down that advice, that's his opportunity
right,
to
but
listen.
Senator, if Rex Tillerson, Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, if he does not agree with your assessment, if he does not see what you see and others see with regard to Russia, does he have your vote?
He'll have a hard time getting my vote because it's clear. Again, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes. What bothers me is that President-elect Trump seems to get the Chinese for what they are. The Iranian agreement is bad. He understands that. He understands the threat we face from ISIL. And he understands we can't let the North Koreans build an ICBM to attack our homeland. When it comes to Russia, he seems to have a blind spot, and I'm completely perplexed because the Russians are undermining democracy throughout the entire world. They're taking land owned by others by force. They did hack into our political system. They're doing it to other political systems, and they need to pay a price. So sanctions are coming, President-elect Trump. I hope you will, after Friday, understand that the Russians did interfere in our election. You're the legitimate president. They didn't change the outcome, but they did release information embarrassing to the Democratic Party. It did affect Hillary Clinton. It wasn't hacking into the vote itself, but it could happen to Republicans in the next election by Iran or China if you don't push back now.
Senator Lindsey Graham, thanks so much for being with us on this very, very busy day. And go Clemson. Let's just say go Clemson.
And don't listen to Julian Assange on anything. Thank you.
Senator, thank you as always. We apprate it.
Thank you.
All right, break.